many of you knew my husband, Tim Rand, and he did a lot of lecturing all over the country. And this past month I was redoing my office, and even though we had stacks of his notes, every time he did a lecture he had yellow sheets of paper, and we kept them, and we had boxes and boxes of them. So I had gone through some, given some to Serena, and she was working on them, but I found another file. I started going through it, and I found this one lecture mixed in with all these yellow papers that was actually typed out. And it was very unusual, and I started to read it, and I went, I remember this. This was back in 1995. Tim was asked to go to a region and give a lecture to the judges. And it was about their responsibility to the sport themselves and the coaches and the gymnasts. And he, normally when he did his lectures, he would sit there and do a couple things, and that would be it, and he'd have his yellow sheets of paper, he'd be in front of you, and he'd be talking, they'd be off to the side, and he'd be going around and around, because he could talk for hours. If any of you knew him well, he could just go on and on and on and on. So, but this one, he sat probably for 2 or 3 weeks, and I'd watch him writing things out, and then he would keep it and go back to it and write it out and go back to it. And then he finally said, would you type this for me? And I said, what are you talking about? You never want to type lecture. He said, I don't want to forget to say some of the things that I want to say. So I have the type lecture. Some of it was a lot geared to the elite and brevet judges at the time, because he was a national team coach. So I took a little bit of that out of it, but I thought the rest of it was very still true today about you and about how important you are, and the other things and how we should get along. So I wanted to read it to you because I'm not real good, and I hope I don't drift off and go there. And one other thing I want to say before I start, the relationship in '95 is not what it is today. The judges and the coaches really didn't get along that well back then. Coaches found it hard to talk to the judges. The judges found it hard to talk to the coaches. They didn't even want to talk to coaches half the time. So we've come a long way that way, and I think it's important to remember how different it was back then. But anyway, this is from Tim Rand, not me, but I'm gonna do the best I can to get through this. So this is going to be a session on how I view the responsibilities and problems facing the judges in our sport, and give you something to think about. We realize that gymnastics is a very unique and separate sport from most others. The fact that we deal with very young athletes, and that there is so much difficulty, so much to learn compared to other sports, puts it in a class by itself. And in the rules that we must work with and learn, well, the rules and the code are enough to make sane people run away from this sport. After all, we have to learn the value of thousands of skills, plus combination bonus, and let's not forget the exceptions. And yet, here we all are. The thing that makes gymnastics most unique, whether we like it or not, is the dependency and the bond that the judges, coaches, and gymnasts have to each other. I can think of no other sport where the officials play such an important role in the sport. In football or basketball, the officials can affect the outcome of a game by a bad call. But for the most part, the players and coaches control their own destiny and play the game, while the officials make sure the rules are followed from the sidelines. But it is up to the players to score and win the game. The official has no part in that. In gymnastics, the officials determine who will win and how they will score. It is the officials who determine the value of each skill that the gymnast performs. It is the official who determines how much execution they wish to take, and it is the official who decides who will take the gold. This is a tremendous amount of responsibility and power, and this should not be taken lightly or never misused. As we are all human, there's no doubt that mistakes will be made. It is almost unavoidable. But the problem is when a gymnastic judge makes a mistake, it can affect the outcome for the athlete or her team. And unlike that football team that has a lot of other chances, even if the official makes a bad call, the gymnast only has 4 chances. And if she receives a bad call on one of her chances, it can really hurt her. I've heard judges say, well, it was just one score we had a problem with, and we probably made a mistake on that score, and it was probably too low, but oh well, it's just one score. But that's 1/4 of their game, and it does mean a lot. So that low score does hurt. But just as a low score can be a problem, overscoring can be a problem too. Probably not to the gymnast that was overscored, but what about the other gymnasts that lost their placement? Probably one of the worst things we can do is when a gymnast falls, we try not to hit her too hard because she fell. Well, what about the gymnast that did not fall, and yet you hit her for all the little things that she did wrong that you did not take on the gymnast that fell? The spread between the two gymnasts becomes too small, and that is not fair. Why shouldn't every gymnast be under the same scrutiny during the entire competition? If you took a deduction for something in one gymnast's routine, you are obligated to take the same deduction for the same error on every gymnast. You cannot ignore or forget to take deductions that have been taken just because you think the score is low enough or you feel sorry that she fell. Bunching scores together and not showing enough difference drives coaches more crazy than anything else. And I can hear him saying that. He probably said it to all of you at some point if you knew him well enough. It's easier to be the coach that gives a gymnast a hug than the judge who has to give the low score. But it's important that you do it if you have to. If all judges would keep this as their motto, they would have very few problems with coaches. If you take a deduction on a gymnast, you will take the same deduction on every gymnast that makes the same mistake no matter who they are. And you will also apply your guidelines for awarding value part and bonus to everyone the same, no matter who they are. Even Shannon Miller, this was 1995, who makes an error, you're obligated in fairness to all of her gymnasts to take the deduction. This philosophy can be applied to all levels, all gymnasts, whether you're judging level 4 or the Olympics. It sounds so simple, but really it isn't, and why not? Well, there are many reasons. Politics. Remember, he was talking to the elite and brevet judges. It is one of the most mentioned at the elite level. But who determines the politics, and who carries out the politics? The only ones that really can are the judges. If the judges refuse to participate by only judging what they saw and not who they saw, politics would have no effect in our sport. Granted, judges are under a great deal of pressure, such as coaches, national office, the press, but sometimes judges also receive the most pressure from their fellow judges. Unfortunately, though, the issue of politics is in the hands of the judges because they are the ones that are on the floor giving the final score. Other things that can influence your score are the coaches, the intimidator, the screamer, who will come after you when the meet is through to jump on your case for what he perceives as his bad scores. The other judges also will pressure you. No judge likes to be the only judge on the panel who took that deduction or did not give the value either to that series or some other skill and is left looking like the bad guy to the coach, even if you are right. And then he says, and my wife hates that when it happens to her. But we know we've all sat on a panel and we know that series should not be given. And sometimes you're left hanging. So another thing is you feel bad for a gymnast. You know she's done it better, so you temper your deductions. That's a wrong logic. You are not evaluating the routine she did last week. You are evaluating the routine she did today. So I know we sometimes do that too. We go, oh, I've seen her do it so much better. but you have to look at what she did today. Yes, I know coaches will come up to you and say, do you know what she scored last week? It's something we have to do and we like to do. But if you applied the same deduction to every gymnast without ever over-deducting the good routines, without under-deducting the bad routines, you will feel confident that you evaluated the routine that each gymnast did that day fairly and objectively. And that does bring me to another point, over-deducting the good routines. Why does this happen? Some judges think that a 9.0 is a great score. Some judges are afraid to throw a 9.6 or higher. It's easier to see every little fault when a gymnast does a great routine, so we tend to take deductions that we did not take on the poor routine. When a gymnast has bent legs, bent arms, toes aren't pointed, they're not on toe, body position is poor, you simply cannot get written down everything that they did, and you miss deductions. But when a gymnast performs a clean, well-executed, it is very easy to see that maybe she could have done that turn a bit higher on toe. Sorry.
You're awesome.
Some judges will come up with a 9.8 and go back and make up deductions or find deductions. Your job is not to find deductions. Your job is to take deductions that exist. Okay, now he's going to talk about the responsibility of the coaches and the judges and how we're so much alike. Coaches should know the rules, judges should know the rules. Coaches should know the code, judges should know the code. Coaches should go to clinic, judges go to clinic. Coaches need to be in the gym, and judges need to be in the gym. Coaches need to evaluate all routines objectively, even their own athletes. Judges need to do the same thing. Coaches need to admit when they made a mistake. Judges need to admit when they made a mistake. And coaches need to respect the difficult job of judging. But judges also need to respect the difficult job of training. Both coaches and judges need to consider how we treat the people around us as well. We all know that some coaches are arrogant and rude, and we need to work on that. But judges have things to consider too. Are you always on time? Are you dressed in your appropriate uniform? Are you prepared with your paper and materials that you will need? Do you thank the meet director for their efforts or complain about the food, the facility, or whatever? Do you expect someone to bring you drinks while you judge? Where in the contract does it say that a meet director has to do this? When a meet directors do the extra, you should thank them and not expect it. As an upper level judge, do you intimidate lower level judges or even lower level coaches? Try to remember what it was like to be new and understand that a few kind words of encouragement can go a long way. When coaches approach you at a meet, are you willing to talk with them or do you refuse to discuss anything with them? Often coaches just want some help. Granted, coaches that harass you is a different story, and that is wrong. But what is wrong with trying to help a coach with a few minutes of your time? This would go a long way in helping coaches and judges' relationships and help to build a respect of coaches for you as a judge. But with that in mind, the number one responsibility of the coach and the judge is to only coach and judge at the level that they are prepared and trained for. Personal goals, aspirations should not be at the sacrifice of our athletes. There is nothing wrong with being a great compulsory coach. If that is all the gym is equipped for, there's nothing wrong with being a great compulsory judge either. If you live in an area that does not have optional gymnasts, you cannot get into a gym, you're too busy to stay current. You need to consider if it is fair for you to judge optional gymnasts when you might not be as prepared as you should be. There's no shame in judging coaching well at a lower level if you don't have the time want to make the time to be at a certain level. What should matter is that you coach or judge at the level that you are comfortable at, that you are educated at, that you are trained at, and that you can honestly say you can do well. Coaches and judges who enter a meet nervous because they do not feel prepared at that level are in trouble and should not be there. And he was saying this is important, but he was talking about our elite judges in many cases, and why people didn't always get put into the elite program as a judge, because sometimes they couldn't get out to see the elite athletes. And they go, well, this isn't fair to me, but the bottom line, it wasn't fair to the athlete either then. So judges can learn a great deal by observing workouts. You can train your eye to pick up areas of skills to see a better skill versus a weaker one. You can see how long it takes to train and how difficult skills are. The dilemma for coaches is we train our gymnasts, hopefully, to do even the most difficult skills with the greatest of ease, so that everything should look easy and effortless to the judge. But if the judge doesn't understand the difficulty and training behind a skill, how can they truly appreciate its value and the value to the routine? Learning from books is criminal in our sport. It takes more than memorizing deductions, skill values, and bonus. Almost anyone can learn to recite and memorize. The judge should know the skills they are judging and recognize them. And they need to have seen a variety of the skill done by many different gymnasts so they know what a good skill should look like. My wife is not always a good book judge, and that she may have to go back and look up a value of a skill from time to time. But she doesn't feel that makes her a bad judge. Her feeling is you can always look up the value of a skill, provided you know what you just saw, and you are able to recognize what you just saw. What good is a judge that can recite every value by heart, but does not know the name of the skill they just saw? Who would you rather have judging your gymnasts? So judges who attend clinics, go into gyms, practice judge on a regular basis, and show consistency and fairness on the floor is a judge who cares for the gymnasts and cares for the sport. Judges are professionals. Please do not view your position as a part-time job to make extra money. Please view your job as a profession that carries with it a great deal of responsibility, and that each and every score you throw does make a difference. I have a great deal of respect for judges and the job they do. I know how difficult it can be to judge 100 or more routines a day. We do more than that now, Tim. And try to keep your focus. I know that there are many pressures from many different sources that you have to contend with. I know without a doubt that coaches are emotional, crazy human beings that are sometimes difficult to deal with. But despite everything, if we all remember how important we are as judges and coaches to our gymnasts, to the growth of our sport, the sport will progress. It is up to each of us to always do the best we can, even if it means being the best and greatest level 5 or 6 judge in the country. And even if it means you will never get to the Olympics or JO Nationals or even a regional meet. I tell my gymnasts that they are all elite gymnasts. They are elite level 4 or 5s. And what that means is just as an elite tries for the perfect 10, so should my level 4s and 5s. They need to be the best level 5 that they can be. My athletes take a great deal of pride in this. And even if they never make it to the optional level, they will have pride that they did as well as they could and always feel good about their gymnastic career. All coaches and judges should strive to be an elite level 5, 6, or 8, or whatever you are. Be the best at every level, and you will always feel confident and good about your work, and that is always a good feeling. Because the judges are so important in our sport, it makes it vital that coaches, judges, and gymnasts work together for the benefit of our sport, and we realize how important each of our jobs are to the progress of our athletes. We cannot do well in this sport without great coaches, but we also need great judges. to evaluate our gymnasts fairly and properly. Every coach, every judge always needs to remember how important they are to each other, to the gymnasts, and to our sport. And that's all I had to say about that.